The grand assembly hall of the Galactic Council glittered with cold, crystalline light, its vaulted ceiling alive with the shifting hues of distant stars. Delegates from 100 species filled the chamber, their forms as varied as the worlds they hailed from. Towering Arcantrians, their translucent bodies refracting light, stood alongside the squat and armored Bruthok. The air buzzed with the low hum of translation devices as the council debated the Sargath ultimatum: surrender their outer colonies or face annihilation. At the far edge of the chamber, Earth's representatives sat in silence. Captain Jake Ross, a square-jawed former Marine, clenched his fists as the alien diplomats dismissed humanity without so much as a glance. Brandon Hill, a wiry engineer with sharp eyes and a restless energy, muttered under his breath. Next to him, Logan Carter, calm and deliberate, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, watching the proceedings with the intensity of a hawk. "The humans," an Arcantrian delegate said, its voice an ethereal chime, "they can offer nothing but chaos. Let them observe as the Council's true powers handle the Sargath." Jake's jaw tightened further. "Chaos is how we win wars," he whispered to Logan, who smirked faintly. The Sargath hologram shimmered in the center of the chamber, a monstrous amalgamation of shifting organic and mechanical parts, its voice a guttural growl. "You have until the next rotation of your precious core world to decide. Defiance will bring extinction." The hologram flickered out, and silence fell. For a moment no one spoke, each delegate retreating into their private communications or whispered consultations. The council leader, a tall, bird-like Vulcan named Arleth Vez, spread her glimmering wings and called for order. "The Sargath are an existential threat," she said. "We must respond swiftly and decisively. I propose an immediate mobilization of the High Fleet." A Bruthok general rumbled his agreement, his voice like grinding stone. "The Sargath's strength lies in their overwhelming force. We must counter with our own. There is no place for the frail." Jake's patience snapped. Rising from his seat, he spoke before Logan could pull him back. "And what happens when your overwhelming force isn't enough?" His voice carried through the hall, silencing the murmurs. Every eye turned to him. The room seemed to tilt under the weight of their collective disdain. Arleth Vez fixed him with a cold stare. "Earth's delegate wishes to speak." "Earth doesn't wish," Jake said, stepping forward. "We act. The Sargath don't fight wars, they conquer with fear. If you try to match them on their terms, you'll lose." The Bruthok general snorted. "And what does your primitive species propose? Throwing stones at warships?" "Stones work just fine for David," Brandon muttered, loud enough for Jake to hear. Jake smirked but kept his gaze on the council leader. "We've fought wars where survival was impossible," Jake continued. "Not because we were stronger, faster, or smarter, but because we adapted. You need creativity, not brute strength." Arleth tilted her head, her sharp beak clicking. "Creativity will not stop their dreadnoughts from obliterating entire worlds." "Then give us a chance to prove it," Logan interjected, his calm tone cutting through the tension. "Let us hold one of your outer colonies. If we fail, you lose nothing but a planet you were ready to abandon." The room erupted in incredulous murmurs. Jake crossed his arms, unflinching as the council deliberated. Arleth finally raised a taloned hand for silence. "You would stake your species' worth on such a gamble?" Jake stepped forward, his voice steady. "Not a gamble. A promise." After a long pause, Arleth's wings folded. "Very well. The colony of Arinder lies directly in the Sargath's path. It is a small outpost, insignificant in resources or strategic value. You may defend it, but know this: the Council will not intervene should you fail." Jake nodded, his expression hard. "That's all we need." Arinder was a desolate wasteland orbiting a dying star, its surface scarred by ancient volcanic activity. The human team arrived aboard a battered corvette, its hull patched with mismatched alloys. As the colony's governor, a frail, insectoid Yidrix, scuttled toward them, Jake assessed the outpost with a soldier's eye. A dozen prefabricated domes dotted the rocky terrain, their reinforced walls pitted from years of acid storms. The only visible defenses were a pair of rusted turrets, their barrels sagging with disuse. The governor wrung its spindly hands. You are the reinforcements, it chittered, its mandibles clicking nervously. The council has abandoned us, yes. Do you have weapons? Soldiers. Jake's team stepped forward. Brandon, carrying a bag of improvised tools and parts. Logan, clutching a case of scientific equipment. And a handful of grim-faced Marines. Not much of an army, but Jake's grin was sharp. We've got exactly what we need, he said. Where's your control center? The next few days were a blur of activity. Brandon worked tirelessly to repurpose mining equipment into makeshift weaponry, turning drills into plasma lances and cobbling together automated defenses from scavenged parts. Logan analyzed the planet's volatile atmosphere, identifying chemical compounds that could be weaponized against the Sargath. Jake drilled the Marines and the colony's few able-bodied inhabitants, teaching them guerrilla tactics and contingency plans. When the Sargath fleet arrived, their arrogance was palpable. Their first wave consisted of small, agile craft, sent to test the outpost's defenses. They expected a quick massacre. Instead, they found chaos. As the Sargath ships descended, Brandon's jury-rigged cannons sprang to life, spewing molten plasma into the air. Mines buried beneath the surface detonated in brilliant flashes, sending shards of volcanic rock slicing through enemy hulls. When the Sargath retaliated, their energy blasts were disrupted by electromagnetic pulses triggered from Logan's atmospheric generators. The humans fought like cornered wolves, exploiting every weakness they could find. Jake led from the front, coordinating strikes and rallying the defenders whenever their morale faltered. For every human lost, 10 Sargath fell. By the time the first wave retreated, the battlefield was littered with the smoking wreckage of alien ships. The colony's survivors cheered, their fear replaced by something unfamiliar. Hope. Back on the Galactic Council, the news of Arinder's survival spread like wildfire. Arla Vez watched the transmission with narrowed eyes as Jake Ross, bloodied but triumphant, stared into the camera. You wanted proof, he said. You've got it. The feed cut, leaving the council in stunned silence. Arinder's victory earned humanity a sliver of respect within the Galactic Council, but the reprieve was fleeting. The Sargath returned, this time with a fleet large enough to blot out the stars above the battered colony. Their defeat had stung, and their response was merciless. The Council's fleets, still regrouping after earlier losses, remained absent, leaving the humans and the colony's defenders to face the storm alone. Jake Ross stood on the rocky surface, his boots crunching against blackened ash as he surveyed the horizon. A curtain of swirling red dust obscured the setting sun, casting the broken land in a grim shadow. His comm unit crackled as Brandon's voice cut through the static. Command post to Ross. We've got movement on the long-range sensors. Big movement. Jake pressed a finger to his earpiece. How big? Brandon's sigh was audible even through the distortion. Bigger than last time. At least 100 ships, maybe more. They're bringing their A-game. Jake grimaced and turned to Logan Carter, who stood nearby, scanning the horizon through a portable analyzer. What do you think? Jake asked, his voice low. Logan lowered the device, his expression unreadable behind his reflective glasses. I think they've stopped underestimating us. Well, that makes one of us, Jake muttered, glancing back toward the distant colony domes. We're not winning this with what we've got. Logan gave a faint smile, the kind that meant he already had an idea brewing. Then it's a good thing we've never played by their rules. Inside the command post, Brandon Hill was a flurry of motion, surrounded by half-assembled machines and scattered tools. The air smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry, and the faint hum of overloaded generators underscored his muttered curses. When Jake and Logan entered, Brandon barely looked up, waving a wrench in their general direction. Before you ask, Brandon said, No, I don't have a miracle ready, but I do have a half-broken mining drone, 3 crates of scrap metal, and enough explosive residue to level a small moon. So, I'm working on it. Jake chuckled despite himself. That's the spirit. What's the plan? Brandon shoved a tablet into Jake's hands, the screen displaying a rough schematic of the colony and the surrounding terrain. The Sargath are going to hit us hard, but they'll stick to predictable patterns. They rely on brute force, not finesse. If we play smart, We can draw them into the asteroid belt and turn it into a killing ground. Logan leaned over Jake's shoulder, his sharp eyes scanning the map. The belt's unstable. If we trigger a cascade collapse, it'll create enough debris to shred their fleet. But it'll take precision to pull off. Precision, Brandon said, grinning, is my middle name. It's actually Walter, Jake muttered, earning a sharp glare. The plan came together in frantic bursts of creativity and sweat-soaked determination. Brandon worked late into the night, repurposing the mining drone into a makeshift demolition bot equipped with magnetic charges and remote-controlled detonators. Logan developed a chemical catalyst that, when dispersed into the asteroid field, would increase the likelihood of chain reactions. Jake drilled the Marines and local defenders, ensuring everyone knew their role. When the Sargath arrived, their ships descended in perfect, menacing formation. The lead dreadnought, a colossal beast of metal and pulsing organic growths, loomed above the colony like a predatory god. The defenders huddled in trenches and reinforced bunkers, their weapons pitiful against the overwhelming display of power. But Jake wasn't interested in fighting them here. He watched from a forward observation post as the first wave of Sargath fighters closed in. "Hold your fire," he ordered over the comms. His heart hammered, but his voice remained steady. "Wait for the signal." The Sargath ships strafed the surface, their plasma cannons turning the outer defenses to molten slag. Smoke billowed into the air, and screams echoed through the comms. Still, Jake waited, his eyes locked on the lead dreadnought. "Come on," he muttered. "Take the bait." As if hearing his challenge, the Sargath formation shifted. The smaller ships pulled back, allowing the dreadnought to advance. Its shadow swept across the battlefield, blotting out the weak light of Arinder's dying sun. "Now," Jake barked. The defenders opened fire, their weapons targeting the dreadnought's exposed underbelly. It was a futile gesture. Its shields absorbed the blows without a flicker, but it served its purpose. The massive ship lumbered forward, eager to crush the resistance beneath it. "Brandon, you're up," Jake said. Deep within the asteroid belt, Brandon's demolition drone activated, its thrusters firing as it maneuvered between jagged rocks. Brandon sat in the command post, his fingers flying over the controls, sweat dripping from his brow. "Easy, easy," he muttered, guiding the drone into position. A particularly large asteroid drifted into view, its surface riddled with veins of volatile minerals. Brandon grinned. "Perfect." The drone attached its charges, each one emitting a faint hum as it magnetized to the asteroid's surface. Brandon checked his calculations one last time, then triggered the countdown. "Charges are set," he reported. "Time to light the fireworks." Back on the surface, Logan activated his chemical dispersal system. High-altitude drones released canisters into the asteroid field, their contents spreading like a fine mist. The Sargath ships, unaware of the trap, pursued the human forces into the belt. The first explosion was small, a single asteroid fragmenting into pieces. But the shock wave rippled outward, destabilizing nearby rocks. One by one, the asteroids began to collapse, creating a cascading chain reaction. The belt transformed into a swirling maelstrom of destruction, jagged fragments hurtling in every direction. The Sargath fleet faltered. Their smaller ships, unable to maneuver in the chaos, were torn apart. Even the dreadnought's shields flickered under the relentless barrage of debris. Brandon whooped in triumph, but Jake remained focused. "It's not over," Jake said. "Logan, status?" "The catalyst is working," Logan replied, his voice steady. "But the chain reaction's accelerating. We need to get out of here before the whole belt collapses." "Not until that dreadnought's down," Jake said. He grabbed a rocket launcher and joined a group of Marines on the front lines. The Sargath dreadnought, though battered, was still advancing. Jake aimed for a gap in its shields, the weak point exposed by the asteroid impacts. "On my mark," he called. 3, 2, 1. The rockets fired in unison, their trails streaking across the sky. They struck the dreadnought's exposed core, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, with a deafening roar, the ship erupted in a fiery explosion, its remains consumed by the chaos of the asteroid field. Cheers erupted from the defenders. But Jake didn't allow himself to celebrate. He turned to Logan and Brandon, his expression grim. "We bought ourselves time," he said. "But they'll be back. And next time, we won't have an asteroid belt to save us." The room was silent, save for the low hum of the tactical holotable projecting the Sargatha's advancing fleets. Jake Ross stared at the hologram, his jaw tight and his eyes dark with unspoken tension. The remaining members of his team surrounded him, their faces illuminated by the shifting blue light of the projection. The Galactic Council had finally decided to act, but their intervention came with strings attached. Humanity would take the lead against the Sargath alone. 72 hours, Logan Carter said, breaking the silence. He adjusted his glasses, their lenses flashing as he turned toward Jake. "That's how long we have until their main fleet hits the core worlds. If we don't stop them, it's over." 72 hours to pull off the impossible, Brandon Hill said, pacing in tight circles. He ran a hand through his messy hair, his sleeves rolled up to the elbows and grease streaking his fingers. Again, Jake's gaze didn't waver from the hologram. "We've done it before," he said, "and we'll do it again. But this time, we're not just defending. We're taking the fight to them." Brandon stopped pacing, his brows raised in disbelief. "To their homeworld? You've lost it, Ross." "No," Logan said quietly, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "He's right. If we want to stop the Sargath, we have to cut them off at the source. Their fleet isn't just strong, it's self-sustaining. Every ship, every weapon is grown and repaired using resources from their planet. Take that away, and they fall apart." Jake turned to Brandon. "We know their supply lines. We know their weak points. And thanks to the Council finally sharing their intel, we know their defenses. We can do this." Brandon let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "You're talking about sneaking a handful of humans into the most heavily fortified system in the galaxy. Their atmosphere alone could kill us before we even get a shot off." "Not if we adapt," Logan said, his tone steady. "I've been working on a way to counter their biomechanical systems. Earth's microbes, they're unlike anything the Sargath have evolved to handle. If we can weaponize them, we won't need to destroy their infrastructure. We can infect it, dismantle it from within." Brandon's eyes lit up with reluctant admiration. "That's insane." "Insane works," Jake said, his voice cold and decisive. "Now let's make it happen." The team worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each man contributing his expertise to the impossible mission. Brandon modified their ship, the Endeavor, retrofitting its hull with stolen Sargath technology to render it invisible to their scanners. The ship's engines hummed with a quiet ferocity, their power output maximized for the daring infiltration. Logan synthesized the microbial weapon in a makeshift lab, his hand steady despite the monumental pressure. Jake oversaw it all, his sharp commands cutting through the tension as they prepared for the fight of their lives. The Endeavor launched into the void, slipping through enemy patrols and skimming the edges of gravity wells to mask its signature. Every second brought them closer to the heart of the Sargath Empire. When they arrived, the Sargath homeworld loomed before them, an unholy amalgam of organic growth and mechanical architecture. Massive spires jutted from its surface, pulsating with a sickly green light. Swarms of defense drones circled the planet like a living shield. "That's the ugliest thing I've ever seen," Brandon muttered, his hands hovering over the ship's controls. Jake didn't flinch. "Stay focused. Logan, are the payloads ready?" "Ready and waiting," Logan confirmed, his voice calm. He glanced at Jake. "Once we deploy, there's no going back." "There never was," Jake said. He turned to the crew, his voice steady and firm. "This is it, gentlemen. No one's coming to save us, and no one's going to remember us if we fail. But if we succeed, we save every life in the galaxy. Let's finish this." The Endeavor slipped through the planet's defenses, weaving between patrols and automated turrets with barely a whisper. The modified cloaking systems held, masking their presence as they descended toward the surface. The team deployed in EVA suits, their boots crunching against the planet's strange, fleshy terrain. The air was thick with toxic fumes, and the ground pulsed beneath their feet like a living thing. "Lovely place," Brandon quipped, scanning the horizon. "Remind me to vacation here." "Stay sharp," Jake said, leading the team toward a towering spire that dominated the landscape. Logan had identified it as the central hub of the Sargatha's biomechanical network, the perfect target for their microbial payload. As they approached, the ground trembled, and a low, guttural roar echoed through the air. Massive shapes emerged from the shadows, their bodies grotesque amalgamations of organic and mechanical parts. Sargath sentinels, their glowing eyes locked onto the humans, and with a deafening shriek, they charged. "Brandon, cover fire," Jake barked, raising his rifle. Brandon unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts, his shots precise and relentless. Logan activated a drone, its small form darting through the chaos to deliver the first payload into the spire's outer vents. Jake moved with calculated efficiency, his rifle cutting down sentinels as they closed in. "Payload 1 delivered," Logan reported, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Good. Let's keep moving," Jake shouted. The team pressed forward, each step a battle against overwhelming odds. More sentinels swarmed from the shadows, their shrieks piercing through the haze. Brandon rigged explosives to slow their advance, the blast sending chunks of biomechanical flesh and metal flying. "Payload 2 is in," Logan called out. His voice cracked slightly, but his resolve didn't falter. "The network is destabilizing." The ground beneath them began to quake violently, the spire groaning as its structure weakened. The Sargath defenses faltered, their drones veering off course and their sentinels convulsing as the microbes spread through their systems. The planet itself seemed to writhe in agony, its biomechanical core unraveling from within. "We've done it," Brandon shouted, a wild grin on his face. "It's working." But Jake didn't stop. He led the team back toward the Endeavor, his sharp commands cutting through the cacophony. "We're not done until we're off this rock." The team reached the ship just as the spire collapsed, a deafening roar shaking the planet to its core. The Endeavor launched into the sky, its engines roaring as it escaped the collapsing biomechanical network. Behind them, the Sargath homeworld burned, its spires crumbling and its defenses falling silent. In the silence of space, Jake stood on the bridge, staring at the ruined planet on the screen. Brandon leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. "I can't believe we pulled that off." Logan nodded, his expression weary but triumphant. "It's over." Jake's lips tightened into a thin smile. "No, it's just beginning."